What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Steelers Breakdown Podcast. Nick Farabaugh here with you guys, and we are talking training camp. Are you guys ready? Are you feeling it? I will be down there Wednesday when they report. First practice is on Thursday, and we will officially be in football season. The week is here, and that means this week is going to be dedicated all towards training camp coverage. Later in the week, obviously, I will actually have thoughts from practices. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about things I'm hoping to learn. I always get this question a lot every time I go on a radio hit, whether I'm on the fan or somewhere else. Someone asks me, "What are you hoping to learn? What's the top storylines?" So let's break down some things that I'm hoping to learn in training camp this year, things to watch. We talked about players that are on kind of the wire, someone that could make it, maybe won't make it. And I think when I look at things I want to learn, I'm watching those guys a lot. I'm watching position battles. And the first position battle I'm watching is no question wide receiver. It is it depending on how you view safety. There's really nothing at safety, which is the issue. Free safety. It's really Juan Thornhill, and they don't really have a natural free safety other than Quindale Johnson on the roster. Sebastian Castro, who is like the intriguing young UDFA, is a strong safety. And so that's something to look at. How do they kind of look at the safety position and where all that comes in? But I think wide receiver, in terms of actually watching at camp, is far more um, intriguing and far more fun to watch because we're going to see what Calvin Austin looks like. We're going to see what Roman Wilson looks like. Roman Wilson, I think, is a fascinating piece in all of this because he's kind of just this question mark. Like we don't know if Roman Wilson is good or if he's bad. Um, that is the thing about Roman Wilson is that it's not like you can outright say he's not good. I think people have kind of jumped the shark a little bit on that a bit. Some people have already kind of declared that and stamped their mark and kind of have their minds made up on what Roman Wilson is. But he was injured last year. He had a really bad ankle injury, and then he came and had what I would say was a debilitating recovery. And then on top of that, comes back and pulls his hamstring right after he gets his first playing time. Listen, this guy was going to start having legitimate reps. Like I think that's something people forget about is that he had just cracked the lineup and then pulled his hammy. And so health is going to be a big part of that. Let's see how much of a solution he can be to this issue. Otherwise, I think you need to start looking at wide receiver as a legitimate option for the Steelers for them to go out and get. So let's see what goes on. I think it's a very interesting discussion to have when you're looking at Pittsburgh and specifically what they need a wide receiver, because there's still names out there like Gabe Davis and Amari Cooper and Keenan Allen and maybe even some on the trade market you can maybe try and pluck into. So it's really important, I think, for the Steelers to go and evaluate this position. So first thing I'm trying to learn here is that wide receiver, very important. Second thing I'm trying to learn is how are they going to use Jalen Ramsey? And we're going to find out very quickly how they're going to use him. The Steelers don't really hide their dime package. Probably take 2 or 3 days before we get a preview of what they'll be in dime. And so we will see the Steelers' dime package very early on. We will see how they're kind of going to utilize a lot of these players very early on. And that goes to Jalen Ramsey. And Ramsey is a really fun player in that he can kind of condense multiple roles into one. But are we looking at, more nickel this year? Are we looking at him playing outside and then shifting inside with Slay as the guy off the field? That's my suspicion when they're in base is that it's gonna be Darius Slay off the field, but it also could be depending on matchup. If they feel Slay has a better matchup against this guy versus, um, say, Joey Porter Jr. having a better matchup against them. So all of that kind of comes together, and it's towing a line and what you kind of want to do with Jalen Ramsey at this point in his career. He's 30. He's not as athletic as he once was. He's still very athletic, though. And so he's probably better off full time in the slot. I think that's where he's going to go. Um, I do think that is where they're going to put him this year for the majority of it. But let's see. How much does he roll into dime packages and take on the Cam Sutton-ish role where he's kind of going back into pseudo safety sets? I don't think we're talking about him in base ever as a safety. But are we talking about him as a sub package chess piece, which is what I think we are going to see him as? So that's one thing I want to learn. The third thing I want to learn is how the heck does this tight end room work? That I think is a key question to this. If this offense doesn't have another weapon, obviously the three tight ends, Washington, Smith, and Freiermuth, are huge pieces. And that to me is extremely important to note. Um, they are a weird trio kind of fitting together. Like this isn't a natural fit where you just go, okay, I put them there, put them there, put them there. Like we've talked about this in some ways, and it comes down to the math game in the run game. Freiermuth and Smith is an absolutely great duo of pass catching tight ends. They are really good. They're fluid. I still think Muth's underrated. I think Jonnu is going to be really good in the yak game, screens, and coming on a crossers, working in the quick game. He's going to fit really well with Aaron Rodgers. I love that fit with Aaron Rodgers. But here's the thing. When you play 12 personnel, you're playing 12 personnel not just to have tight ends running routes. You're doing it to play a mismatch game. When you go into 12 and 13 personnel, you're hoping defenses match you in heavier personnel, that they go into their base packages, that they get out of nickel, and that you can then kind of put Jonnu Smith and Pat Freiermuth on a linebacker. You can put them on a smaller body in the red zone. You're kind of hoping that, right? And so there's this mismatch type deal, but it only works if you can run the football. If you want them to respond in the way where they, can maybe go into base and then you can spread them out. Well, they gotta be fearful of your run game. If they're just a nickel, spread them out, kind of condense them, it doesn't work as well. Now, can the Steelers still have some success out of 12 and 13 personnel even if they had them up short, but it's not going to be as potent. And the run game is going to suffer. Johnny Smith's not a great blocker. Fryman's an average to below average block. So you gotta kind of have force multipliers in the run game as tight ends. And it works in Baltimore because, Likely and Andrews are fine blockers. They're not elite blockers, but they kind of hold their own. Smith is not that. Freiermuth is a solid enough blocker, I think, to at least force defenses to match them in some way. But how do you kind of utilize them? And so I think there's ways to do this. I think you can use 13 personnel almost as your 12 personnel, where Smith becomes kind of your wide receiver two, if you will. It would be traditional 13 personnel, but you would flex out Jonnu and have different ways of getting him the ball with DK Metcalf in there, and you can do some different fun things there. And I think you got to flex him out, have him stock block a lot more than putting his hand to the dirt and trying to get him to block defensive ends and linebackers. It's just not Jonnu Smith's game. So if you kind of get him in open space and in yak situations, this is where he's going to eat. So I'm just kind of curious how they're going to mix and match those three players and how you do that. Washington is the great blocker of this trio, and he can really force you to change kind of how you play. So if he's on the field, I think you have to play them almost in bigs, and then you can maybe spread them out and put them in mismatch situations. So there's potential here, but the OC has to have the vision for it. And so I'm gonna start to see kind of what Arthur Smith thinks about when he looks at his tight end room and how he's going to try and weave that in. So that is one thing that I am really, really fascinated by. Fourth that I am looking for is I want to see Kaleb Johnson. Just in general, I just want to see Kaleb Johnson. I was so enthused and excited by Kaleb Johnson's work ethic in the spring that I'm really excited to see what happens when he gets the pads on. I really am. Um, this guy was so dedicated to trying to fix his one ill in pass pro, in trying to dissect the little things that he could do from his hand usage to his hips snapping forward to just all of that little stuff. He was so programmed and so dialed in to trying to fix things that it really is going to be fun to see when the things come together and he has to go on backs on backers and he has to face someone like Patrick Queen or someone like Peyton Wilson or even Malik Harrison, how it kind of manifests. Because we're talking about a player that has really, really taken the attention to detail, admitted his own weakness, and has come out with a fervor, a work ethic that is really awesome to watch. So I'm really excited to see how that manifests itself and just kind of how Kaleb Johnson looks in the passing game and especially in pass pro. Backs on backers with Kaleb Johnson is going to be fun because I really want to see that. So that's another thing. It's going to determine how quickly Kaleb Johnson gets on the football field versus how much Jalen Warren's going to play. If you can trust KJ in pass pro in catching the football and doing some different things, I think he instantly gets a shot up in terms of playing a lot more. And then the last thing I really want to learn here is what's the schematic vision of this team? Because I think last year you looked at both the defensive and offensive side of the football and you didn't come out of that inspired by your schematics. I think defensively you were too static. You played too much spot drop three and basic cover one. You didn't have enough disguises on early downs. The late down stuff is great. It's always been great. The third down stuff and what the Steelers can do on third downs and kind of how they bait quarterbacks into throwing underneath and how they could bait and change the picture on third down has always been one of my favorite things about the Tomlin offense, Tomlin defense. Sorry. So that has been something that I think pops. But when you are up front, you don't even run basic twists and stunts. You don't run overload blitzes. You just run basic four man rushes with static movement in the back end. It's hard to ask your players to just line up and win. It just is. It's the NFL. It's not like you're, Alabama playing Delaware. Like it's just not that type of league. You can't line up and just play like that. You gotta rotate your safeties a little bit, show different looks from your linebackers, blitz your linebackers, move your edge rushers around, stunt a little bit, bring the slot sometimes. And then when you try to do things, you have to communicate. They didn't communicate when they did try to mix it up last year. And so I'd like to see the Steelers do that a little more. So defensively, I have a lot of complaints and a lot of things I'd like to see. Offensively, I want to see more cohesive game planning, specifically towards your players. I want to see their strengths highlighted. I want to see DK Metcalf running nine routes and deep ends and slants and things that he's really good at and go routes, of course. The back shoulder fade with him and Rodgers has to be a staple of this offense. I want to see Jonnu Smith in space. I don't want to see him tight to the line. I want to see him in space and kind of the way Miami used him. Get him yak chances. Let him be your yak producer. I want to see Kaleb Johnson running these wide mid-zone runs. I want to see Jalen Warren get a lot of these gap carries that you're going to use. He can do zone runs. He's more of a comfortable gap runner. So all these things that I want to see, I just want to see things tailored in a cohesive way rather than being this kind of conjunction of ideas that don't necessarily make sense on a week to week or even a play to play basis, things that build off one another. So I want to see that. I want to see how the Steelers plan to reconcile their schematic failures from last year that they admitted after the season. Mike Tomlin came out literally in his press conference immediately after the season saying that some problems were schematic and they had to look at those. I want to see how they look at those. And so those are going to be key things to watch. All right, folks, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notification bell for more. I will be back tomorrow with John. We will have that live stream at 4 o'clock. Make sure to check that out. Check out the Steelers at PennLive.com/Steelers. You can follow me on Twitter at Farabaugh FB. Thanks for listening, everybody.